Welcome to another episode of SOFREP Radio. I am your host, Rad, and I am super excited today to introduce my next guest. But first, I have to kind of plug the merch store. You guys have been kicking butt buying our merch, our branded items from SOFREP.com. Keep doing it. We really appreciate it. It keeps me behind the camera, in front of the camera, on the side of the camera. It keeps the fireplace going. And then also, we have a book club, right? We're really passionate about our book club, and it's SOFREP.com/book-club. That's book-club. So I want you to go check it out. We're going to try to get our next guest and his book in our book club so that you can get it through the book club. And my next guest, without further ado, is Kevin Wilson, the author of Sully Squad. Welcome, Kevin, to the show.
Thank you, Rad. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you for your opportunity here.
Oh, totally. We're excited to have you. Now, I know this is not your first time, playing around with SOFREP, getting on the website. There's some articles probably from back in the, 2020, 2021 area where you were talking about Sully Squad. And I want to kind of touch base on Sully Squad. It's kind of a book about someone who I think calls, just goes to the call of duty for himself, his country, and what is the right thing to do, with Arty, who we're going to touch base on. And then, it's all happening around, Pearl Harbor and, the Oahu, the attacks on Pearl Harbor from the Japanese. World War II is kicking off, and there was a lot of lives lost, a lot of young lives lost. And so with that said, Kevin, I'd like to just take a moment here, of silence, if you don't mind. All right, and that is in respect of the lives lost during World War II on really both sides of the aisle. Okay, there were so many people who took up arms on both sides of what they thought was just and right. Someone living in a neighborhood in their country picking up a gun, and us living in our country picking up a gun. I don't know the difference of patriotism there, because they're both trying to do it for what they think is the right thing. But good and evil lurks, and evil lurks even harder, sometimes looking like good. And so here we are talking about your book, Sully Squad, which focuses really on, the call to action in World War II. And we follow the young man Arty through his journey, correct?
Correct. Yes. Arty was, it's funny, Brad, when it came time to write, and I'm not a writer, I'm not an author, by trade. My background is a CPA background, and I've been in healthcare operations for almost 40 years. So I say that because there might be people listening out there who are afraid to take that first step, at writing. So for myself, I basically wrote it in a month and learned the term rewrite multiple times, like your worst English teacher, just grading you an F continuously. And eventually, the person I was working with said, "What do you want to say?" And I said, "Well, I want young people," because this was probably 2017, 2018, 2019 timeframe, young people to honor those that have given so much and still give so much, honor the flag, and have something that's fast-paced, because whatever I write has to compete against video games.
Right.
And so I basically came up with, they said, "Well, you should talk about young adults." And I go, "Well, what is that?" She goes, "YA. It's a genre. Look it up." So I looked it up and started writing, and I created a character named Arty. And there were stories throughout the years that I learned of young people that lied about their age and were able to get into service, mostly, again, in the World War II era, probably in World War I maybe. So that's where I'm like, okay, I want someone to be the reader, have it told through his eyes, and be attached to his hip. And have Arty be a character who you could relate to. Everybody's been 15, 16, that is an older person can relate to some of that. And somebody who's not yet there, maybe 14 or so, can kind of relate to that. And basically talk about the combination of is basically a typical kid, but the only difference is he's in combat.
Right.
But simple things like, you kind of have to go back in your own self when you write these things. And my favorite line in the story, which I made up, which I'm proud to say, is after he meets there's a girl in the story. After he meets her, he says something that he's like, "Why did I say that?" And he goes, "It's easier to fight the Nazis than it is to talk to a girl." Ugh. So I think I think the combination of the combat attached to his hip with this, you're talking about it, just basically an innocent kid when all is said and done. So that's how Arty kind of materialized.
Right. And I like, in some of it, there's like an excerpt that I was reading about, and it talks about, him and his family, and they're getting like a Christmas tree brought into the house. And, you talk about how he takes the needle and he likes to floss his teeth with the needle from the pine tree as he's like, it looks good over there, Dad or Mom. No, a little bit higher, he's like flossing it with his tooth. And then all of a sudden on the radio, I believe, we interrupt this broadcast for a news bulletin, and it's like, it's Oahu. We are looking for Congress to declare war and give us authorization to go to war. We have been attacked in Pearl Harbor, and this is a blatant attack, and you can expect a retaliatory attack back to you for what you've done to us. And that's just tit for tat, right? Eye for an eye right now. So, and then all of a sudden the radio goes back to, drink your Ovaltine. Okay.
Yeah.
And his dad walks out hitting his pipe like, okay, we're going to war, right? He slams the door, goes outside, hitting his pipe. He's like, I could just imagine. And then he's like, well, here I go. It probably just sank in right there. Well, if Dad's hitting his pipe, maybe I should go hit mine.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely. And it's the interesting thing is on that is, again, back to the child innocence. Those of us that live, in the north and had school days, called because of snow, you would before 24/7 weather, you would look up in the clouds and see a little dark over there, a little chill in the air, the wind's a little picking up. Maybe we'll have no school tomorrow. So you can see the innocence, and then all of a sudden, as you very well said, bam, here comes the reality of life. And your life is changing, in not only his life, but that had to be one of the most, that changed so many people's lives. Not only the poor sailors who were killed at the time, but the families, and then look for the next number of years. And it just, in my lifetime, I could remember 9/11. And probably many of your listeners will remember that day. Where you were, what you're doing that day. So I kind of equate that to someone who's 15 years old reading this story for the first time that is, wasn't around for 9/11, but maybe has heard about it. Well, that was that generation's beyond equivalent of 9/11, and that wake up call, and life will never be the same. Whether you enlisted young or didn't.
Wow, you're deep, because I'm thinking like, I remember so I'm 46, 9/11 was my, I guess, big thing in my generation. Would you think that? Is that your big thing in your generation? How old are you?
I'm 62.
What was your big thing in your generation? Is it 9/11 also?
Probably. Well, it's, I grew up, I was
Vietnam
1.5 when Kennedy was shot.
Yes.
So I don't remember that, but I remember like growing up with Vietnam, because you'd be sitting there eating your meat and potatoes, so to speak. And on the TV was, whether it was Walter Cronkite or whomever you watched,
Dan Rather,
and Dan Rather, he'd be out in the field at that time. And and you're sitting there eating and you're seeing these guys, at war. And and then when I was in 1973, I remember this in 5th grade, celebrating the end of the war. And then the Challenger, I'm trying to go in order, the Challenger going down. I remember where I was there, and then probably, I'm probably missing a couple, but then fast forward to 9/11.
Really, Challenger, a Desert Storm, and then
Yeah, oh yeah, Desert Storm, yep,
9/11.
exactly.
I know there's a little off skirt
Yeah,
skirmishes that happen all the time, but
yeah, yeah,
the next generation is the 15-year-old we're talking about, who will have to pick up the pieces from where we're leaving off, if you will. And
right,
guys
right.
my age are retiring or trying to stay in the military at 46 if they're high ranked already, but most of the
Hmm.
guys are out and about living a civilian life. So these youngsters should read your book. And if you're thinking about, possibly getting in the military and you want to, go check it out, go talk to a career counselor and see if somebody can point you in the right direction of what's best suited
Yeah,
for you.
yes.
You may not have to lie about it like Arty did in World War II. We all saw
Hmm.
a movie. I can't remember what it was called, but he has a big star on his shield. Anyways, he's like, I got to get in. I got to get in. And they're like, you're not getting in, kid.
Yeah,
And he's like, finally, 10th time later, he's in. And
yeah,
and the
yeah,
heart is bigger than anybody else's heart that was trying to get in. And he proved that and became the ultimate symbol of, Captain America. And Artie seems to call that same vibe, as he's going after it. Now, you go into a little bit more depth with him going into combat in the book, right, Artie?
yeah. It starts out. It takes place in the Sicilian campaign,
Mhm.
and it's reason I chose Sicily is a late uncle of mine, and a VFW post up in Granville, New York, which is I have to give a shout out to Granville.
Granville.
It's on the border of Vermont and New York, and on West Main Street, or I'm sorry, East Main Street. You can stand in two states. That was always exciting as a kid. But it's a quarry town, so a lot of slate quarries and a lot of Italian immigrants came in, and they were sent up to Granville along with other nationalities. So my uncle Salvatore Fringi was born, and he was the oldest of five. And my mother, how I connect with him, my mother was the youngest of the five. So that's how I connect to Salvatore. Now, my grandparents Americanized his name and called him Sullivan, and he shortened it to Sully. That's how the Sully comes out. So Sully in the story is a sergeant. So he's nonfiction because he actually existed. I use a different last name, but he exists as a sergeant. And he was in World War II, in the Big Red One, as a combat engineer. But in the story, he's in an infantry squad. He's a sergeant of an infantry squad. And he was in North Africa, and he was killed in action in Sicily. So that's why I chose Sicily to have the story. And I don't know about you, Reb, I always watched World War II, and I still do, whether it's YouTube, World at War, World War II in color, whatever you
Sure.
call it. And so the Sicilian campaign, they talk about it, but they never got into the weather. And they actually landed in July of 1943 in a gale storm in the middle of the night. And so I'm thinking, so it starts out with them on the deck. So it immediately gets into some action. And then, maybe some of your listeners did this, but I'm like, then you got 90 pounds on you, you pack. You probably weigh 140 pounds soaking wet. And you're then having to climb down these wet ropes or whatever they were into this landing craft. So I start out with actually getting to that level of detail, because I think it gets lost when you watch the shows. It's like all of a sudden these guys land on the beach and hey, but what they went through to even survive to get to the beach, and then oh by the way, there they are, the enemy on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You've had the enemy in the air, you've been facing. So it's incredible what these men, in my opinion, went through, and the utmost respect that I'm hoping when a reader gets out of this is not only entertained by the action, but also stepping back and realizing it's a brotherhood, and I know the Band of Brothers was tremendous. There's, so I give them the credit. I give everybody else the credit in the documentaries when they would talk about their fellow brethren, whether it was World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, as you mentioned, Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
You were protecting that guy next to you. And that's what I hope the reader gets out of this. Yeah, they horse around, they have a little fun. I mean, they're kids. When all said and done, they're kids. But when the light turns on and all of a sudden it happens, some are ready I don't know how you're ever ready, but some are more ready than others. And there's also where you got to help the guy next to you. Simple thing like loading his gun. I mean, everybody takes that for granted. Oh yeah, I got him load my gun. But when you're under fire,
yeah, right,
having to load a gun,
right, reloading get you killed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where taking it through with the book and the combat and the brotherhood. I think the other point is it was a squad, and with flashbacks, you try to get the characters in a short time to be known to the reader. And I think, it was a lot of work. And the term show me, don't tell me was something I constantly heard from the person who edited the story. Because, as I said earlier, my background is business. Mm-hmm. So business is get to the point. What's going on? In one page, I don't have time to read. Tell me what's going on. Well, when you write a novel, it's the opposite. Describe everything. Describe the imagery. Mm-hmm. What's going through the mind of the character. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and for me, it was rather than say, Arty walked down the street, I had to describe the street, describe his walk. Right. What was, all your senses. And that was hard initially. For me to do, and that's why you get 5 or 6 rewrites because I had to work on it.
That's really good insight into what how you wrote the book and how you had to present it. You're just writing, you're just probably typing away, just going to town, and you're showing, and he wants to be shown it in his mind. He wants his imagination to show it to him, right? Mm-hmm. That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
So if you're going to write a book and start hitting the keys, you should think. Show in our mind. Like, I remember my dad would go and read so many Tom Clancy books, and he was really, down with The Hunt for Red October. And then it came out on a movie. I remember that back in like 89, 90s. And as much as he liked the movie, he said, oh, it was good. But it wasn't like the book. It wasn't what I anticipated the book to be, because he was shown something completely different when he read it. And, and again, it's an interpretation. If I was to take your book and get your rights and make it into a movie, it's how I was shown it, per se, by your writing. I love that analogy of it. So when I write a book, I'm just going to pull some Kevin Wilson, some of your thoughts in there, no sweat. Show. Yeah. I love that. Is there something about possibly getting picked up? Have you talked to any studios or anything about Sully Squad? I mean, sounds like a good angle of a direction of the movie of World War II.
Well, I don't know anyone. And I've had friends that they know someone who's in Hollywood or whomever. And I said, okay, sure. Here's a copy, send it out and see what happens. But it actually, I guess one of the biggest compliments that I heard from someone was it reads like a screenplay. So because of the flow, I wanted to make sure you're flowing along. I mean, there's some slower points. I mean, you can't be landing on a beach for 150 pages. There's got to be some, creative, writing about the character and stuff like that. Because obviously, not everybody doesn't live.
Yeah,
if you're in a squad.
Every step is described on each page as he pulls the Bangalores explained on every single page. I can only imagine exactly 150 pages of like one scene. It's like the TV series 24 with Kiefer Sutherland, where it's just constantly 24 hours. He has to wear the same clothes over and over again for years and seasons.
So I think one of the the back having to do the flashbacks and things of that nature, which actually that's how you build the characters, and it kind of ties in Arty. Like I'm sure there's people like, well who would allow a kid to just walk in, do that, and again, it's fiction. The historical part is true. The Sicilian campaign, where they landed, the cities they fought, some of the battles, etc. But the character, except for my uncle, they're all made up. So with Arty, it's also a coming of age movie. I mean, he's 15 years old. Him and his father don't get along all the time. I mean, I think we all can kind of, relate to that, and you sometimes why does dad act like that?
Yeah.
What's going on with him? And what he didn't know was some of the issues he had from World War I.
Oh, right.
That caused him to behave in a certain way. And it took him to be 3,000 miles, so to speak, away in a letter to kind of understand his father more than when he's like in the same house, which,
immediately when he hits his pipe in the scene when I'm reading it, and he hits his pipe and he goes outside to hit his pipe, I automatically think, oh, he's already a veteran of the previous war. And he's like, great, here we go again.
Right.
I immediately think that. And I just want you to know, I'm just reading, you're showing me that by him seeing his father go outside, shutting the back door, going to his pipe is just like, all right, Dad's just heard that, the U.S. has been attacked. And that's honestly,
and Dad's gonna.
I can relate. You know why? Because my dad came up on 9/11 into my room, and it's like, hey, my dad was in Vietnam, and he's like, oh, hey, Aaron, turn the TV on, and it was the Tower One, and then the second one hit right at like 8 something in the morning, and we were watching it, and he looked at me, and he's like, we're under attack, and he and my mom kind of just watched for a second. He got up and he walked away because he understands what that means.
Yeah.
And I had just gotten out of the Air Force, and so I get it. It's like, okay, what's going on here?
Well, something interesting tying to that. So my uncle, he enlisted in 1938, towards the end of 1938, and I had the privilege, because around that time frame of 1998, 1999, the internet was very new. And I had the privilege of actually communicating with men who were still alive who knew him. Well, one of the things that was always interesting with my uncle is he was due to be discharged December 8th, 1941.
Oh, wow.
And so I was able, one of the few things I heard, the family never talked about it. I'd see pictures of this man on the wall in my house. So my grandmother was still alive. We lived with my grandmother. She was, I was very young, and she said I resembled him, and that planted, because I have a cleft, and I actually looked I looked very much like
resemblance is there.
Resemblance is there, but not at 62. But still, some people, say, yeah, I could see it. I have a high school picture next to him. But this gentleman was saying, I would ask, what was his personality? He said, well, he's pretty mild-mannered except for one day. I said, he was discharged. They let him go December 6th, the afternoon. So he had taken off. No one knew he was in the States, because the war wasn't yet, had started. No one knew where he was going, but he was gone. He was done with the Army. Right. He said on December 8th, when he came back, he was extremely unhappy. And obviously, you're a sergeant, you're a combat engineer. He would have had to come back anyway. But it just shows the interesting that he probably wasn't the only one that was.
Is it Pearl Harbor on December 7th?
December 7th, yeah.
Right. So that's the thing that we're hitting on here is December 7th. He takes off December 6th. He's like, I'm out. Peace out. Okay, everybody. Yeah. And little does he know, the airplanes are in the sky.
Yeah, exactly. And
they're launching, because it was a dawn raid, I believe, like when they came in early. Yeah. Early morning.
Early.
Everybody was like kind of off.
Maybe 6 a.m. Hawaiian time.
Exactly.
So probably noon around here.
Yes.
And so no, it's so that's kind of where the father, in the story, he's a World War I veteran. And I don't want to say too much, obviously,
right. Go get the book for sure.
He has some, he's affected by it.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, who came over, on the boat, so to speak, from Italy, he ended up having to serve in World War I. So he died of a heart attack in 1935 when Sully was 17.
Oh.
Yeah, he died in the house. So that's one of the reasons that drove him into the military, into the Army, to make some money. So he could also send money home, which he did. For 3 years he would send money home to the family because his mother, and he had four other siblings that were younger. But the father, there's definitely some learning that Arty received while not being in the same house with his father, but being the 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, and at that time, so he got in at 15, right? This is what we're talking about. So he does get in at 15.
Yeah.
15, let's think. My son's 15 right now, and he's really good at Minecraft. So if somebody needs a mayor of a city, he could probably pull that off just fine. I'm thinking, what would he be enlisting as? You know what I'm saying? Like, is he ready to do such things? And then there's a lot of that talk right now going on where, are the kids still doing PE in school and trying to, almost stay, fit, some of the Boy Scouts, it kind of like dissipates away and falls into the cracks, and there's still some little pockets of Boy Scouts happening, but not like it was. Not like it was, and some of those folks are still trying to keep that going so that there's that kind of, how to start a fire, how to set up a tent, how to just procure food, how to clean drink water, fix yourself, simple things, survival in the woods, Yeah, Arty wasn't soft.
No. But he loved baseball, and that was kind of the one of the connections he made with a friend of his called Coney. Everybody seemed to have a nickname, so I made nicknames, for all of them. And baseball was his first love. But he wasn't like most of us, think, oh, we're going to make it to the major leagues, or whether it's in baseball or whatever sport, or acting or music. And the reality sets in when you get a certain age, well, others are better than you, or you're not, you're just, I think you need to find something else.
I still think I can go pro in something. And if it's baseball, that would be my first love. And I think that's why I like Arty so much. Now that you say that, because I love baseball. First base is my position. And, for 16 years I played, thinking I'm a college pro, all this stuff. That all, by my own choice, though. I know the steps that I could have kept going, and I took other steps, and that was my own fault.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
Me too. Not necessarily to make pro, but college or something.
Sure.
Definitely, didn't, it's kind of like, when you got to dust yourself up, get back up again.
Yeah.
You get cut. You're not used to being cut. Well, put your big boy pants on, get back out there, work harder, make them regret. But, you don't think about that, when you're that age. And that's where Arty, is kind of like some of the mistakes I made. He doesn't make those mistakes because I made them up, but no. And then there is a girl in the story about the same age, Angelina, and she's a postulant. I didn't want to do a nurse because it seems like there's a lot of, the soldier and the nurse, that kind of stories. So she's
what's a postulant? I'm sorry, I don't mean to know everything. I call in the book, and it's probably the easiest way. It's a nun-in-training. Oh, okay.
You're kind of. I'm sorry.
Like getting ready to enroll in the nunnery.
My religious
Sure.
training and from catechism and stuff, but it's the easiest way to describe it. It's someone who's interested in possibly the religious life, and you're young and you start as a postulant to see, to see if it's for you until you commit further. So she's at an orphanage, which is part of a church in one of the towns, and that's how they meet. And he ends up, in some manner, through the combat, through the fighting, to find his way back every now and then, because she's, she also supports a mobile hospital, so kind of like a MASH unit kind of thing, because she's a postulant, so they do whatever they're not a nurse, but they can,
the bowls of everything, help prep, get it all squared away, help out, be right there, the right hand for somebody. They could stitch you.
Exactly.
She could. Yeah.
So, and it's kind of a little bantering, there's no sex, there's nothing, in the story. It's just innocence, and I'll leave it at that, because again, I don't want to tell too much,
right.
But it's just, it's just, again, a shy kid. She's shy, and kind of their interactions in a place that's falling apart all around.
Well, there is no more innocence.
Right, exactly.
Right. War, right? Like what that changes somebody.
Yeah.
I've seen it in friends, and friends have gone and come home after a year and a half, and they're just, hey, I'm like, you're moving so fast in your head still, aren't you? That's why we're still sitting here playing the same video game that you just left us a year and a half ago, but you've moved so fast, bro. I'm thinking of a certain friend, and he just sat there, and he was just kind of, it's like we stalled him in life. We were slow. His friendship with us was slow. He had moved, and he had gone into the military. They had groomed him into this, military person, and he went and did his job, and he came back, and he's like, I've moved so fast. You guys are still like molasses.
Yeah. It's like when I talked to, the gentlemen who were, had served with my uncle. One of them was a lieutenant. And let me jump back just to one. It was 1998. No one ever talked about anything rad. So this was 55 years after he passed away, was killed in action. There was a reunion, 55th anniversary at the VFW in Granville, New York. And that was in October. So a month later at Thanksgiving, my aunt, I'd mention his name, she'd start crying. All of a sudden said, well, we started talking out of the blue about her brother. And she said, I think so-and-so was with him when he died. And I said, so-and-so, is that? I think I know his son. So fast forward, I contacted his son. I go, it's kind of going to be kind of weird. I think your father was with my uncle when he was killed. And so he talks to his father, brings him. We go to a restaurant. And it's one of those restaurants for lunch. They have like 55 items on their menu. He can't figure out the menu. He's probably in his 80s, early 80s. I have my little questions written down. He looks me in the eye, goes, I'm sure you want to know how he died. Cut right to the chase. And how my uncle was killed is in the story. He doesn't die in the story. I told my aunt he'll never die again, when I was writing it. But he went right back to that period of time. And then he was describing what was going on. And then he went back, and they ended up, they would bury anybody who was killed. They would bury you in a shallow grave and move on. And so that was, say, July 21st, 1943. His remains didn't come back to 1948. 5 years later, when you think of all, because again, you're in a shallow grave somewhere in Sicily.
War.
And you think of how many. And so I talked to this lieutenant, who was the lieutenant for the squad, or for my uncle was in. And he said, and he was, I could feel him like getting a lump in his throat. And this is, again, we're talking 55, 50, almost 60 years later.
Yeah, he's 82, right?
Yeah. And then, so this next gentleman I was talking to, the lieutenant, was on the phone, and I could feel him like kind of like almost, tearful. And he goes, "Please tell your family that, we neutralized the battery that killed your uncle." So back to the war comment, that you made, Red. And I say this, when I speak to schools, no one wins.
Mm-mm.
Who won in that story? You said earlier, on both sides. We prayed for both sides. I'm not talking the SS. I'm not talking the fanaticals. No. The average German soldier, just like the average American soldier, was just doing their job.
That's it. For what they believed in their patriot, what they were told, what they
exactly.
Yes.
And they paid their, they died.
They died. The ultimate sacrifice.
When all said and done, they were doing their job. My uncle was doing his job, and no one won. No one came out alive in that example.
And
other guys.
And like you touched on earlier, they're fighting for their friend on their side too. Just like we're fighting for our friend on our side. And it's like, there was that time where it got all quiet, for Christmas during the war. Everybody kind of had like a little bit of a makeshift armistice right there. They were like, are we cool? Can we have a smoke?
Yeah. I mean, the stories, the World War I stories, where they bring out the soccer balls, the British and the Germans, and they, like you said, they had an armistice, and they had a cat that came between both lines, and they each had different names for the cat, And
it's like the cat was just walking around, and they're just trying not to shoot the cat. Don't shoot the cat.
Exactly.
It's because there's still a heart inside of someone to not shoot the cat because it's a cat.
Right. Yeah.
Man, and I just I understand that we need to be built up to fight, but be built up so much that we can be humble to not have to fight if we don't have to fight.
Right.
Train up to be humble, so you can just say, "Hey, I'm right here. Don't poke the bear." It's a bear.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But people want to poke it, right? And then we have to have we don't have just in radio coming back to you in 5 seconds with more information. Now it's just funneled into your cerebral cortex. We have nothing but this channel and SOFREP Media channel, and all of our channels are out there just running into your brain with a supercomputer facing your eye, telling you everything going on in the world of everything today. It's not like then. And so today it's like,
no,
it gets so, I don't know, there's just so much more propaganda.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, and that's one of the, why I wanted also in the story to make the importance of the letters. The letters that were sent to the guys in the front, and the guys that were supposed to write letters and sending them back home. But it's kind of like I saw some communication between my uncle and family members, and my grandmother was she was a tough lady, and she would like, "Why aren't you writing more?" And he's like, "Well, I'm a little busy, Mom." Yeah. I'm kind of a little busy. But I think, what I included in the book, too, to your point exactly, Red, is I want the person to read it. Obviously, the older people know. But the younger people, you didn't know where your son was or your daughter. If she was a nurse, an Army nurse or what, you didn't know where they were. There was no, "Hey, I'm gonna call you on a little FaceTime here." Hey, let's see. You had no clue where they were. And that now people are bombarded. They're at a dinner table, out to dinner. They're each on a phone. They're not even talking to each other. So the people need, the youth need to understand they didn't know where their son was. So youth, and in the book I kind of say where, they would go to a movie, and back in that time, the movies would show some clips of some of the fighting on the front. And, the parents trying to see if they could see their son, I'm sure everybody did that, that would go.
I saw a movie. I want to say I saw a movie where the guy the soldier had written a bunch of letters home. Just writing home. How come no one writes back? Hey, how come? And then all of a sudden he gets them all back to him. They never even got home. His letters even got out to, and that just psychologically was like, oh, no one even knew the letters. They like moved to the house, and he doesn't know what's going on at home. The letters just came back,
Exactly. He doesn't. Yep.
It was like a mail call. Mail call, Jones, here's your mail. And it was like his return mail. It's like, what?
And everybody was probably envious. And then it's like, wow, look all the letters you got back. And it's like you said, returned mail. But it's, and then they had to be careful because there's like some templates that are in the book. Because if you're in North Africa, or if you're in Sicily, or if you're in training, amphibious training or something, you got to be careful what you write. So they would have like these little templates where you would like check a box, rather than say, love, blah, 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 rather than say much, because, from a censor standpoint, you could be giving away, the loose lips sink ships, scenario.
Right. And like, what if the guy carrying the mail got taken out and they got his mail and you're like, Mom, I'm behind a bunker right now. Like, oh, this is a fresh letter.
Yeah. I mean, and to your point with the 24/7 news, 24/7 sports, 24/7 weather, everything is big news, big top, flashing. Yes. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when the programming stopped. This is a special news report, and like all of a sudden you saw that the program stopped. Chills would go down your because something major happened. Right. Now, to your point, it's like breaking news, and you're reading it. What? What's that?
Yeah, it's like just the same. It's the same stuff. They're like they're just pumping it. It's so today. Like everything is just happening right now, and you can just say, "Oh, what's going on in Gaza today? What's going on in Ukraine today? What's going on?" And to that point, I remember like back in 2009, I think it was like MSN Messenger was a little pop-up window we had. It would pop up. You could talk to your friends, and communicate back and forth through the laptops, et cetera, through that program. And my friend in Afghanistan, it was like 2 a.m. here, and he reaches out to me. Hey, you awake? I was like, I sure am. He's like, man, I wish I was home and playing war games with you guys. I see more action in war games than I do here. But then when he came home, that's not true. But he was just saying, I miss you guys. But just right there, it was like instantaneous. And he was probably bummed out, thinking, I miss home. I'm going to try to get online and see who's online. And here's Rad. He's like, hey, Rad, tell me how things are back in Utah right now. And I'm like, oh, well, what's going on, Solid? A call sign.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there have been some good movies that have dealt with that. I forget the name of it, but I remember it was like a 1946 movie. And, when people came back, because like people come back, everybody else is like, okay, the war's over. Great. Okay. Joe's back. Okay, you're the same guy that left.
Right. No.
And Joe wants to meet with Jim, who he never knew Jim, but they both were over there. So there's a connection they have where others don't. And then the wife's like, why are you drinking so much? Or why you?
Right.
So they
why are you chasing demons?
Onto those
demons away. It's
exactly.
Like, what are you doing?
Now that what people know today, and there's still more to do. Back then, it was like, what's wrong with
shell shock? They didn't want to talk about it.
If they saw if they saw the physical aspect, like he lost his hands, but no, why is he like crying in the middle of the night? Why is he screaming? Right. What's he yelling? What's wrong with my son? I mean, and
maybe nothing's wrong with him, right? No, maybe nothing is wrong. It's just emotions of a situation that I'm not coping with. You're not coping with. He's coping with. And so he is going to have the emotional tears, and it's not what's wrong with you. It's like, no, I'm normal. If you saw what I saw, you would too.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And those men never talked about it. Friends of mine, we talk about in Granville, we grew up in a street full of, today they'd call them heroes. Well, they were heroes back then. They were guys that survived the war. Mm-hmm. But, they'd be walking around, working a gas station, work on a farm, regular people. But they never talked about it. But they obviously saw things that affected them. And I think the great thing with the Band of Brothers and shows like that, towards the end of their lives, they started to open up, and get some of that out. And even their kids didn't know, their kids could have been
Saving Private Ryan, like Saving Private Ryan. It starts out, he's old at the cemetery, and his kids are with him, and they're like, "Gee, Dad, are you okay?" As he takes a knee, starts crying, and then it takes us right back into he's storming the beach, and they're puking on the patrol boats or landing craft, and his homie's scooping up sand and putting it in the thing, and it had Sicily and France, and now he has Normandy, like what you were talking about. That guy, he's been all over those beaches, bro. How many?
And he was a sergeant too. He was a sergeant.
He sure was. And he just was like, "Where's my chew? Where's my gun? And where's the sand cans that I got to carry all through this mission, man?" Jeez, and it's things like this movie called The Hurt Locker. Jeremy Renner, I believe is his name. He got injured by a snowcat recently, but he plays an explosive ordnance disposal guy who's been in Iraq and all these other places just defusing bombs, and his life's at risk. He just walks up to it, flicks a cigarette, and just starts going to work on the wires. Everybody else will be like, he just like takes the suit off. He doesn't even care. And then he comes home and he's in the grocery store, and they pan on him, and he's just like holding a box of like Lucky Charms at his legs, but no one's around him. He's just like staring, like everything. Really? Do you know what's going on where I just came from? And here we are, know? And so that's that same kind of shell shock you're talking about. He gets out, he comes back, and he's like, everyone's like, "What's wrong with you?" But as soon as he goes back, he re-enlists, and he goes back to his job. He's like, "Hey, let's take these wires apart." Born and bred for that kind of lifestyle, man. There are those out there.
Yes, there are. And it's, you're talking earlier about, growing up through the years. There used to be, and you can still see it on YouTube, there used to be a show called Combat. And it was like every week it was a squad, that fought in France. Initially, I believe it started with the D-Day invasion and then went into France. But that was an interesting show, because it you get different characters and you got connected to the characters. And I think, that's where Sully's squad, not everybody comes out alive. It would be ridiculous to think that would. Different personalities. As we've talked a couple times, and I'll bring it up a third time because I think it's very important. Both sides were, except for the fanatics, were thinking they were doing what was best and right. And one of the characters in Sully's squad is Jewish, and his family left Germany because of what was taking place. And it's not trying to be annoying when I wrote it, but he would, if he saw somebody German, like a German soldier, he would ask, "Hey, anybody know anybody from Munich?" or something like or something like that. Because again, you're those people had to leave home. It affected us here at Pearl Harbor, but you think about that. In the mid 30s, you had people leaving Germany, leaving wherever, who didn't like what was going on, or then had to leave because their businesses were destroyed, or so they've been going through something several years that we just started at the end of 1941.
Right.
So it's kind of like, having that, it was more to have, how much you think about if all of a sudden you had to, in the middle of the night, leave your home, flee, and that's, again, I wrote it too for history purposes, it's kind of it's in 3 schools. I'm trying to get more, but it's it's not it doesn't necessarily fit some of the narrative that's out there today.
It's a book.
It's a book,
and you should read it.
But you read
books.
Just read it. It's fast paced.
Yes.
It's but it's telling history.
It's a show and tell book because, like I said, I already felt just from what I read about his father and just how he plucked his teeth with the pine needle and he just got the minty taste of it in his teeth. And I just know that, Sully is doing what his heart tells him to do.
Yep. And
Arty, excuse me, Arty.
Arty, Arty, yeah. But also, and I'm sure there's people listening, I tried to also, when you give a command, and like these guys said, he had to give a command as a sergeant, but he was there with them, and sometimes guys don't make it back.
Yeah.
There has to be a part of you that goes away. There has to be something, you can't, okay, Sarah, that's the way it goes. Yeah. No, you don't have that. I mean, some characters in movies in World War II, that were focused on power, maybe them. Yeah. But the average guy who's, whether it's Army, Navy, Marines, Air, you name it, didn't want to see any of those under his command get hurt, not to mention, die.
Right.
And then if you make a decision, which Arty actually, as a private, had to make a decision one time under combat, and I'll let the reader read that part of it.
Yes.
But but I think that's the other part too. When we talk about people that come back, the memories, and like one older gentleman said, they never had a chance for a family. He was like 80, 90 years old at the time. He welled up tears and said they're still their kid. I still see John as John at age 18, and now look at me. I'm 80 years old, and I've had a chance to live my life. Right. John never did.
No, the memory is always that of that person at that age. 100%.
Yeah.
100%, man.
Yeah.
What a great book, and what a good time for you to put it on paper and still stay in the healthcare business and not give up your daytime job. I know a little bit about a thing or two with you, so don't you worry. So that's good.
Yeah, I don't want to give up. Yeah, not giving up the daytime job.
No. But hey, if you're out there and you're thinking about, and you're trying to brainstorm something at your studio or your production crew, reach out to Kevin Wilson and go read his book and see if it's a book that will make a great screenplay. And reach out to him and hey, that's how it happens, right? It just takes one person to get involved. And so we can find your book everywhere, right? It's all over. It's at all the major places and online, correct?
Yeah, it's on, with yourselves, and it's on, on Amazon.
Amazon.
Yourselves. It's a book, and also the, it's got a Kindle version.
Is there an Audible?
I would love. No, but but I'm hoping one of the outcomes of this could do an Audible version of it.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
And I'm also working on a second. Kind of got stalled a little bit because you're doing this at night or maybe on weekends, and sometimes your mind isn't creative.
Yeah.
You're thinking of work, and it's not like a 9-to-5 job, so sometimes it carries over, and also when you think of the second, what are you going to talk about? So I got to a certain point, and I kind of hit a wall, and but I'm going to resume that, break that wall down, and resume it.
Rewrite.
Well, I'm sure it'll be more. Yeah, I'm rewriting myself.
That's
now.
What I'm saying. Yes.
Back at it.
Ting, tick, 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 tick. Rewrite me.
I know. Exactly. I go, that makes no sense. Delete.
Yes. No, wait, I need to stay here. Not delete me, just delete. Start over.
Right.
Well, listen, I want to thank Guy, right? We have our friend Guy at SOFREP. He's our editor. Yeah. He's like, hey, Rad, you guys need to meet. And he brought us together. And I want to give a shout out to Guy. And I also want to give a shout out to Brandon Webb, who keeps SOFREP, just going with all of us rowing along with him on this ship. So we really appreciate being on board. And I'm grateful to have this position to talk to, authors and rock stars like yourself, Kevin. Everybody just has such a cool story, and I love talking about it. So thank you for sharing your story and talking about Sully Squad, which you can find at Amazon. Thanks for allowing me to be introduced to Arty and his father with his pipe. I love it. And to your VFW friends that are on Main Street in Vermont and on the border of New York, thank you for your service. And on behalf of Kevin, this is Rad saying thank you for tuning into SOFREP. Check out our book club where you can find Sully Squad at sofrep.com/book-club. And this is Rad saying thanks to everybody behind the scenes that helped me make me look good. So thank you and peace.